evening. It's almost not evening yet, but my name is Marilyn Taylor. I'm the director of the Institute for Values-Based Leadership, which is part of the leadership school here at Royal Road. And it's a delight for me to welcome both you here and those of you online to this screening of a documentary which has just recently been produced, and we have the pleasure of having the executive producer with us. What I wanted to say was that the format here will be that we will have a short introduction by the executive producer, and then we will view the film, and then we will have a panel discussion and a whole room discussion with that panel about it. So without further waving around here, Jill, I would like to introduce Gillian Wright, who is the executive producer of this film. She is the co-director of a recently established World Servers Foundation in Geneva, whose purpose is really to foster the kind of new thinking and the kind of action expressing the new thinking that can lead us out of some of the perfect storm effects that we have of the economy, the environment, and social inequities and so on. So, Jill, I wonder if you'd come up and just introduce us to this wonderful piece of work.
Thank you, Marilyn. Good evening, good afternoon. Actually, Marilyn has given you a great few words on the foundation. I don't want to take up too much time talking about it, except to say that we started at the end of November. We had about a year's lead-in time, which gave me a bit of time to make the film. My background is not in filmmaking, I hasten to say, but for some reason I keep being asked to make films from time to time. And the reason that I created this one was to provide a sort of context for why an organization like the World Service Foundation is relevant in our time. And our basic values are to do with collaboration and cooperation, and they seem like such simple things. But as we know, they don't manifest in a very coherent way across our world right now. And the film isn't something that's aiming to look critically at various nations, otherwise we'd be filming for quite a few years yet. We are looking at the positive spirit of various kinds of initiatives and individuals from various parts of the world. So you'll notice that there are all manner of things weaving in and out here. And it's made as a discussion point. It's not trying to preach at all. It's trying to give some sort of voice to where we are and where possibly, with the help of youth and their vision, we might be going. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
We've grown up in a world where we've been told that we're kind of screwed. I think one of the hardest things is growing up and being told that the world isn't going to work for everybody, that somebody is always going to lose. So your job is just to make sure that it's not you that loses.
You teach us how to behave in the world. Then why do you go out and do the things you tell us not to do?
I mean, that is an intergenerational crime.
Capitalism as we know it, business as we know it, is not working. It's made a lot of money, but it's also made a huge mess, and the mess is now undermining the making of the money. People think, oh, if I own this sports car or that yacht, I'm somebody.
The old story is he who dies with the most toys wins. So it's really a call for support and aid from every one of us in this world. The cells of humanity are still fighting each other.
If someone dies and then someone kills someone else, and I wanted the cycle to end. Remember that word, compromise?
I chose to quit violence because I know that violence brings only more violence.
What's evolving now is our consciousness, and what we're really evolving is into another form of humanity.
The central plank of both quantum physics and spiritual intelligence is this notion of holism.
It's the survival of all of us, or there's no survival at all.
We want a world that works for everybody, and somewhere we know that that's possible.
In some ways, the revolutions that are happening, the chaos that is occurring, is to be welcomed.
There was enough corruption in Egypt, I think, to feed the world.
We're breaking down the old systems so the new can come into being.
People merged together from all classes in all districts. They got to know each other, they exchanged phone numbers, they got organized.
And it also evolved to being a community-based support system.
It's basically the birth ground of real democracy.
They had just erased all the differences. It has actually uncaged their caged souls.
I saw a lot of situations where I said, I would just go and fight. But the Egyptian people are by nature the sweetest in the world, out of my perspective. And what they have done is that amazing that the president of Austria has said that the Egyptians deserve the Nobel Prize of Peace.
I think that Egypt now is going to be in the heart of a different kind of world that's going to mean hope and prosperity for a lot of people.
Nations are effectively crucibles of consciousness.
The world changed beyond recognition. In China, the young people feel very strongly about the necessity to do more for the world. You know, the concepts, democracy, human rights, it's from the West. The world is facing many challenges, but the mindset is still in the past. To my mind, the destiny of mankind in the 21st century will be determined by this competition.
We're living in a time of change, and there's a lot of confusion as to what is it that I can do. There are a lot of inequity that the world seems to be so vast beyond me, the environment, the social equity, things that are happening here in China, and how the world is seeing China beyond just this new rich, this wealthy country.
I mean, it's very hard to say, is the world getting better, is the world getting worse? It probably is getting worse. It's a world that needs guiding values more than it ever has.
I started asking the children to brainstorm what fairness meant to them, what type of words they could think of that related to fairness.
I'm a firm believer in that children with a good values base will do the best they possibly can academically.
One of my favourite values is respect, because that outlines basically everything that you do. It's in all of the other values. It's I have to say it's the first one you have to learn.
We human beings who are soft-wired for empathic distress, is it possible we could actually extend our empathy to the entire human race? If it's possible to imagine that, then we may be able to save our species and save our planet.
Where are the philosophers of mind? Where are the philosophers of soul? Where have they all gone? We need them.
No matter how old you are, you shouldn't lie. It's not honesty.
Once upon a time, there lived an emperor who was so insecure he spent all his time obsessing about his clothes.
People want to be CEO, they want to have the corner office. It's about status, it's about who I am, look at me, I'm doing well in the world. It's all about my ego.
Yes, I agree!
Oh, sir, thank you. The emperor realized he had a choice. He could admit that there was nothing there, or he could pretend to see the cloth and keep his status.
Dad, why not wearing any clothes?
The modern illusion is that there's an inexhaustible supply of money, materials, and natural resources. And we know that's not true.
People define me as a philanthrope and banker. If you ask me what this monastery is, I can tell you this is nothing else than a power station which generates energy. Many of us who are in business, who are in the possession of the energy of the money, we have to help and serve.
We need a new leadership paradigm.
The servant leader serves the community, he serves the environment, he serves the planet, he serves future generations, he serves life itself.
Speak out in every way that you possibly can, because tomorrow and today is yours.
If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it.
We need to work together.
Will we be participants or will we be observers watching from the sideline? It's up to us. It's our participation that will manifest our evolution.
Of small and large human initiatives that do that, and so it was enormously exciting. Yeah, and today actually we have people who in Victoria exemplify that, embody that approach. It's a very subtle. It's a very subtle thing. What does it mean to balance self-interest with the common good? I want to invite the panel up by first Lisa Helps, who is a new councillor on the City of Victoria City Council, who in her way is balancing, is evolving, has spent a good deal of time developing micro-lending, which liberates people in communities, which provide, so that it enables people to provide their own source of a way out of a situation of not having what they need. And so I'd like, Lisa, for you to come forward. Thank you. Stacy Taves, if you have coffee down in our Habitat Cafe, you'll see Level Ground Trading Coffee. Stacy was a founder of this company 15 years ago. He's a passionate supporter of a business that also respects and enables small farmers, and he'll probably talk more about that. He's also gone over the country talking about this kind of work. Stacey? Stephen Webb has been with Rural Roads about as long as it's existed, and just before, I think, we just learned. Stephen exemplifies ethical investing and values-based financial planning with Manulife. He's a member. He's a board member of the social investment organization. I attended a conference of people coming from all over Canada to talk about what it means to advance ethical investing and socially responsible planning. Stephen, thank you for being here. And Jill, we'll get you to come up and join us. crowding around a small table here. Our purpose here is to actually, I've seen this film actually about 15 times, and I see more in it every time. It's an incredible, intense collage of stories that follow this theme. And our intent here is to hear what people, our panel, think about the film, and then also to drill down in a conversation with you about what are the most significant pieces of this, and with a focus on what eventually we should be taking out of it, and what our opportunities are. So maybe we could start, Lisa, with you, if you wouldn't mind sharing what you have.
I'm very happy to do that. This is what my notes look like, so you can see what I'm working from. It's a lot of scribble. We had the privilege of viewing the film in advance of today, which was great. So today was my second time through, and I'm sure on a third, fourth, and fifth time through I'd get more out of it. Two things really struck me in the film, and I want to talk briefly about those and then connect them to the work that I've been doing, not Canucks. I don't even like hockey. Connects them to the work that I've been doing here in Victoria. So the two things are the parallel lines. We kept hearing a lot from the fellow with the wearing blue a lot. We need a shift in consciousness, a shift in consciousness, a shift in consciousness. But then we also heard a lot from other speakers, and particularly from looking at the little vignettes of things that are happening around the world, that this is a participatory evolution, that we need to change by doing. And in fact, the piece that I want to pick up from that is what one of the young women said about Egypt. She said, what we gained out of it, out of the revolution there, is that we started to know each other. And I come from an academic background, if you can believe it. I was working on a PhD in history when I abandoned that and turned it into community microlending. But one of the things I've realized about myself and about working in community for the last 3 years is that I learn better by and through doing. And so I think when we think about a shift in consciousness, it's not just that we need to sit around and meditate and hope for the best. I think we actually shift our consciousness, at least this has been true for me in the starting of community microlending, by doing together in community. So that's the piece of the film that I found most profound and most poignant, is yes, we need a higher level of consciousness, a shift in consciousness, but we get there not by thinking only, but by doing. And one of the things that I learned on my academic journey, and that has been true, again, starting community microlending, is that ideas in and of themselves are wonderful and they're fun to toss around. But really, if we want to take ourselves and our world seriously, and if we want to move towards this new way of being that's necessary to have these kinds of evolutions that are necessary, we need to see ideas as tools, like a hammer. Right? What can I do with this hammer? What can I build with this? What can I do with this idea? What can this turn into? And so ideas in and of themselves are fun, but I think ideas, if they're going to serve us well, need to be propellants of meaningful action in the world. Ideas as propellants of meaningful action. So that's one piece from the film. The second that I wanted to pick up, and we saw this in a lot of the examples, is collaboration. And I think it's not just that we need new ideas, it's that we need new ways of collaborating. And collaboration should make us very, 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 what am I going to say next? Very uncomfortable. If we're truly collaborating, if we're stretching ourselves and not just surrounding ourselves with people who think just like us, because, you know, that's really easy. We should be uncomfortable as we collaborate. This revolution, this evolution should be very uncomfortable as we stretch ourselves beyond what our idea is to shape and shift and carry that idea forward along with others. And I'm not saying that that's easy, and I'm not even saying that it's always fun. When we started community microlending, I didn't know a damn thing about lending money, but I knew a heck of a lot about community. And so I surrounded myself, in terms of the original board of directors, with people who knew about banking, about lending, about all of the things that we needed to make this happen. And we had fights. Like, there was actual yelling from time to time. And that's okay, because the vision was, as Marilyn said, to get capital into the hands of local people who wanted to become self-employed, start small businesses, but had terrible credit bad debt and didn't qualify for credit from a bank. So that was the vision. We were all focused on that vision, but it didn't mean that we all sat around and it was all easy and nice. And the reason is, and again this came out of the film, is that difference is absolutely critical if we're going to turn ideas into action. We can't just work with people who are like us, people who think like us, people who feel the same way that we do. If we're going to have truly resilient, meaningful change, we need to look across the room and think, wow, I have nothing to say to that person. I better go start up a conversation. I'll leave it at that.
You want to just keep on going down the line here? Exactly. Okay, great. Well, a few thoughts. I viewed the film for the first time a few nights ago, and I sat down with my wife and my 2 oldest kids. And we watched it in the evening together, and then the next morning at breakfast, while I was making them breakfast, I asked them what their thoughts were, and it was great to get the feedback of different ages. And I don't know to what degree you've gotten to expose the film early on in Canada now to people of different ages, and what the feedback's been, depending on generations. I'd love to hear that. For me, the part that struck me the deepest by far was Egypt. Like, that story is just so compelling to see hundreds of thousands of people gathering together from all different walks of life and come together. And so for me, that's huge. I'm, as a person in business, always compelled by how business brings about change. And I support charities and love donating, but I'm a big believer in sustainable change coming about through a business model where everyone's playing a role, and at the same time my main message is let's all consume less. So that's a little tough to wed together, but those are 2 messages that I work on a lot. For my 12 and 16-year-old who responded on what they loved about the movie, it was all about the Australian kids and values. And it's interesting that among my kids, quite varied, all 4 from different birth families because we've adopted. And so we all come wired differently, and I always joke with my kids, it's like getting a puppy at the pound. I don't know genetically how big you're going to get, I don't know what your interests are going to be, and maybe you'd feel the same with a whole bunch of birth kids. They could all be completely different as well. But I really resonate with what the principal was saying there about how the values as a solid foundation creates an opportunity for learning. I've, over the last 10 years with a nonprofit group that I started, spoken about 150 to 200 times a year for 10 years, classroom by classroom across the country. And at the end of the day, having spoken to 30, 40 kids at a time and done it over 1,000 times, closer to 2,000 times, the schools that have worked on values with their kids are the schools where the kids are a pleasure to work with, and you see the level and depth of interaction with content being so much different than the schools where they focus on simply academically, let's get this idea into your head. And when values are there, change happens and great leaders are born, and when content is simply the focus, I just see it fall flat time and again. So it was interesting to see my kids both responding with the values is what was all about for them. And I don't think it was just the age of the kids, it was truly the values is what's totally shaped them in their schooling experiences. The part I was hoping for in the movie that I didn't get to see, I didn't see it there, I'm sure you'll have great thoughts on this too. I always believe some of the best change happens in communities through food. I'm a big believer in having your hands dirty and doing it together. I think the single biggest community builder I've ever been part of is growing food together, and the second biggest is eating food that you've grown together. And so I love farming and being involved in every aspect of growing my own food, and that's a big part of what my wife and I have focused on doing in our community and with others around us. And so, along that vein, and I think building a lot on what Lisa said as well, I wanted to read a quote. The book I'm working through right now is from a guy named Wendell Berry. And Wendell has this book here called The Art of the Commonplace, and I just wanted to read a quote. Because right after I finished reading the movie, or watching the movie, I picked up where I was at with the book, and it like resonated right away. So this is just a paragraph. People don't work or shop or amuse themselves or go to church or school in their own neighborhoods anymore, and are therefore free to separate themselves from their workplaces and economic sources, and to sort themselves into economic categories in which, having no need for each other, they remain strangers. I assume this is bad, because I assume it's good for people to know each other. I assume especially that it's good for people to know each other across the lines of economy and vocation. Professional people should know their clients outside their offices. Teachers should know the families of their students. University professors and intellectuals should know the communities and the households that will be affected by their ideas. Rich people and poor people should know each other. And if this familiar knowledge does not exist, then these various groups will think of each other and deal with each other on the basis of stereotypes, as vicious and ultimately as dangerous as the stereotypes of race. And I love what he says there, because I know that when I go out to coach ball for one of my kids, one of the other coaches on the team is also my kid's teacher at school. And when you're gardening and growing food and learning ball and bumping into people at the library and they're all part of your community where you live, it's a lot harder to hide secrets. It's a lot greater place to form values and character. And I just love the idea. For me, I live in Brentwood Bay, and I'm a champion of living in a small community where so many people are connected in so many different ways. Two final thoughts as images in the last couple weeks or months that I've experienced through my business. One, I took all 4 of my kids and my wife. We went to the south part of the Philippines where we started a trade relationship with coffee farmers, but it's all been done through a peace building organization. If you ever look up Coffee for Peace, and they twin together with a group called Peace Builders Communities. And I've lived in the Philippines before, and that same island where I'd lived is the island where we were traveling, and we were coming home from a several-day road trip visiting indigenous peoples who we've purchased coffee from. And they're not farmers per se, they're more stewards of the forest, working with wild-grown plants in amongst a very diverse ecosystem that they've protected after getting back their logging rights. When the leader of their organization was actually killed by the logging companies, they went to take up arms, and Peace Builders stepped in and said, "You've got to stop this cycle. We're going to teach you another way, and it's called peace and reconciliation. We're going to forgive the people who killed your leader. We're going to bury our guns, and we're going to become agrarian and find a way back to our roots, what we used to do here." And it's been miraculous to watch. So we're coming back after a several-day road trip, and we come to one of many roadblocks, and it's late at night, and some of my kids are sleeping, and we're slumped over with our host Dan in the van, who's the leader of Peace Builders, and we roll down the window, and several machine guns are stuffed into the window. And I don't know if you've ever been a person traveling at night in a developing country. I've done it many times, but not so often with all my kids. And when my kids are sleeping on my lap and a machine gun's 6 inches from my face, it feels quite intimidating. And Dan looks up, my friend, Peace Builders leader guy, and he looks at the soldier and he says, "Hey, I know you!" And he says, "I've trained them all." And I said, "What do you mean, Dan?" He says, 50 people at a time, I've trained 3,500 people. All the military police and all the soldiers on the whole island have been required by the government to go through my peace and reconciliation seminars. And they recognized him and talked to him by name. And so the sense of total peace in a place where the arms were so prolific was profound. The other story would just be last week, my wife returned from India. We've just established tea growing relationships with small-scale farmers there. And when you've got small-scale farmers, but they do own land, in an otherwise caste system, there's a lot of layers and power. And my wife came away with numerous stories, but in one instance, 20 different workers together, all receiving equal access to a direct fair trade premium that was spent on the tea that they collectively harvest from this one little 5-acre farm we purchased the harvest of last year from. They got to decide cooperatively, first time they've ever done this, on how they would spend money, and they all agreed none of them had clean water in their homes. And with the money that we were able to include in the purchase, not a donation, but part of our purchase price, they, in the course of a 1-hour meeting, were able to execute a plan that within 1 month would have all 20 of their households with clean drinking water. In another situation, just the day prior to that, the translator finished a meeting where 47 people were seated on the ground with my wife, and they walked away, and this woman's English to my wife at the close of the meeting was, "Madame, this meeting has been record breakable." I love that. It's the first time that a person from an outside company has sat on the ground with our people and told us we are all equals. And out of that, it's been truly revolutionary in these communities. They got one little write-up, a paragraph long, in the local newspaper, and within 48 hours, I had 7 emails from different small-scale farmers saying, "We want to do business with you." So it was really exciting to get to be part of basically flattening things out and providing a message of equality.
Thanks. Now I have to follow that up? You know, when Marilyn asked me to be part of this, for me it's been a lifelong journey of trying to personally follow values, not just in everyday living and how we raise our children. And often when I talk with clients, when they ask, well, what do you mean by values? And that's why, again, that Australian example in the film is so powerful, is because it really is, for me, it's about what are the values that we want our children to grow up with. Which sounds very naive in some cases because it's fairly straightforward. It is fairness, it is integrity, it's responsibility, It's all those words that we use. And I think every one of us here probably would go, yeah, I try to be fair every day. But we get outside and you know, the powerful speech that Ms. Suzuki gave to the UN, and you know, some of us will remember when that happened and going, my God. And you see it again now and you think, it rings so true today. And what's wrong with us? And I think for me, it's not about what's wrong with us. It's about what's right and where do we go from here. So we've seen a rear view mirror almost, if you will, through the film this afternoon. And it's what are the next steps we need to take? What stops us from making that next step? And almost every day I deal with a tremendous number of companies who have huge warts. I mean, there is no such thing as a perfect company. They don't exist. Why? Because every one of us probably sits on the board of that company. We're human beings. We all have warts. We all get growly, we make dumb decisions. And so the idea for me is patience. We all have to learn to crawl, then we walk, and then we run. Many of us in this room are already running. We're not really sure where, but we're running. But we look back and the film illustrates really well some of the opposites that are going on or interpretations. So we saw China. And my relationship I have with some Chinese companies are a mixed bag. They're from everything from, wow, look at what they're doing. You get really excited because they're leading the world in some places, to, my God, what are they doing to Tibet? What is going on there? We have to recognize and respect and appreciate that those things are happening and not always judge, I think, where people are at. But they're never going to get to crawl, walk, and run if we don't include them, if it doesn't become a we. And I truly believe that. There's not enough time left in this world to keep battling each other. We're human beings. And so when I sit down and talk with companies, I'll tell you one story and I'm going to pass this over. This is several years ago. I was up north taking, I love north, I spent a lot of time up there. And a few sons born there. And we were on a train, I was on a train from Terrace to Smithers. This is late November, so any of you understand that country, it's absolutely gorgeous. And we were in one of those Bud cars, at least I was, sitting there just in awe of what was happening. And I'd lived 15 years up there, so I knew what to expect, but it was still jaw-dropping. And there was this little girl and her granddad in the Bud car. And he's pointing out all kinds of things, and she is just really excited. We make this corner around the Bulkley River, and far in the distance, there is this clear cut. She says, Grandpa, they've taken down our forest. Grandpa, can't you do something? Can't you tell Shell to fix that? Turned out, he was the Canadian Vice President of Shell. And he criticized what was going on there. He said, I know, it's terrible, isn't it? But Shell we can't fix that. You're going to have to grow more trees there. But I can tell you that I will do everything so that you can enjoy our ski trip. And what he showed, and the conversation went on for some time, but what he showed to me was that here he had a certain set of values that he was using with his granddaughter, and yet we tend to put on a suit, and all of a sudden, the wall goes up. We close down. We don't come from here anymore. We come from here, or a textbook, and we begin making decisions based on what we think are correct that are taught in schools. Not to criticize everything that's taught in schools, but if we don't teach values along with the textbooks, the formulas, we're going to stay where we are today. We're going to keep crawling and walking.
it's probably not fair for me to comment on the film at all, except to say that it was an enormous and unexpected privilege to have the experience of meeting all the people that we met, and to go and have the opportunity to travel with my wonderful production team, who were often in tears in various times, transfixed, speechless by children talking about values, or what was happening in Tahrir Square, and the enormous courage of the people who were there. And it's very interesting that we discovered that some of the people who were there, who were helping us while we were working at that time last year during the Arab Spring's sort of crucial weeks and months, have actually been part of the Barrett values training, which seems to be all over the place now. And for those of you that don't know it, I'm sure Marilyn will fill you in another time, but Richard Barrett has become a lecturer on that course, as I understand it. But apparently this organization called Skopos, that you might have seen the executive director of speaking there, they feel that their role is to try to bring values to the Middle East and North Africa and build bridges of understanding in such a way that, in their words, the soul of the Middle East is invoked, which is an extraordinary thing for a businessman running a company in Cairo to say, I feel. So it was a series of joyful and unexpected experiences. And in China, which is, as you were quite rightly saying, Stephen, such a diverse experience of people's values or awareness of the world, their views on, let's say, Tibet, which I spoke to a lot of people about when I was there, because I was very interested to try and understand how people feel about it. And it's so easy for us to assume that the Chinese people feel the same way as the government. It would be just like somebody saying to you that each of you here represent your Canadian government at the moment and all their decisions. And I'm sure some of you would feel that wasn't true at all. And that's how the Chinese people feel. So I suppose we have to be very mindful not to make assumptions about our brothers and sisters in other nations and what their belief systems are.
Thank you. I told you they were embodied, embodied the spirit of this film. One of the things we have here are two microphones, and we'd really, really love to hear your thoughts as we go, and just step up and maybe say who you are, maybe where you come from, and your question or comment. Thank you.
My name is Gillian, and I'm at a course here and heard about it on a message, and I'm really glad I came. The spirit of service and equality and values, of course, is the way to change the world. I agree with you, I love that, and I learned a lot from seeing the film. The revolution in the Arab world, the Arab Spring, and then the Palestinian-Israeli work together was really heartwarming and encouraging. However, I belong to the Canada-Tibet Committee, and the genocide in Tibet, really, I was angry when I first saw part about China, because I do admire and respect that side of it, but I couldn't understand how you could talk about the Arab Spring and the the Palestinian-Israeli situation, and then go to Australia and China and not mention the injustice there. The Falun Gong people are having their organs removed forcibly, as they probably are doing with the Tibetan prisoners, and the genocide in Tibet, I don't feel should be passed over like that without any commentary and bringing them to accountability. As there must be a way of showing something positive that could be done, or else not including China in the film. I'm sorry, I feel very strongly about it, and I'm quite saddened that China could be shown in the, the best side of it without addressing the issue after you've shown the Arab revolution. And the same with Australia, where the Aborigines. I did notice that you had one little opening scene with an Aborigine person, and it looked like 2 monks on the Great Wall. So I know there's some consciousness, but it seemed such a change of pace from showing the first 2 and then showing them, and that's all. I'd like to know how you decided to go about that.
Sure, they're very reasonable comments. Well, first of all, I was brought up in Australia, and so I've had an awful lot to do with the Aboriginal side of things and been very active in that myself. But we were looking at areas where there were particular and immediate social responses that were standing up to governments in particular. And we didn't see that when we were in China. So that's what we were looking at, where there was this shift of thinking going on in a very palpable way, as is happening in the Palestinian and Israeli conflicts, where the combatants for peace are gathering momentum with their work in a very particular way, and equally that sort of momentum is happening in Egypt. But we didn't see that sort of momentum happening in China. It's happening other people like us, because I've spent a great deal of time standing up for what's happening in Tibet, the rights of the Tibetan people over the years, and I was in an organization where I was working with the Dalai Lama and a team for 8 years. So these subjects are very close to my heart. However, we were looking at where a nation was, certainly a certain majority of the nation were coming together to demonstrate. So that's why, because that isn't happening at the moment in China.
When there's genocide going on, I don't understand how it can be just ignored. Sorry, that's just...
Well,
thanks for explaining your point of view.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Comments? I just want to pick up on a point about what this film does, which is, I think, very powerful. And it is focusing on what people are doing and what people are accomplishing. We look at the news every night to hear about what's not happening. And for example, on last Friday, Jill and I were invited out to Pearson College to listen to the Coots lecture, and the lecturer was Joe Clark, Right Honorable Joe Clark. And he made the same point, that we are constantly looking at what's going wrong. And we're not looking, and we're not, the story we tell ourselves, stories we tell ourselves are the things that are, in one sense, discouraging. And we miss the whole, the enormous effort that people are making all over the world. Joe Clark made the point that that literally volunteers are supporting a huge amount of the hospital of the healthcare in the whole continent of Africa. There are millions of people who are moving things forward, like you've heard here, transforming the relationship of business to community, for example. And somehow, my own view is that that needs to be what our story's about. Because what our story's about is where we're going to end up, I think, to some extent. How we think is going to be affecting, who we become. So actually, that's why the film is, for me, really very powerful. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Don. I'm a student here. I'm from Victoria. I'm in the environmental program. I really enjoyed the inclusion of the Chinese because I do have that incredible criticism, and I went to culinary school 2 years ago in Vancouver, and there were 2 Chinese people in that course. One was a chef and one was a student. And the Chinese student was the most generous giving of any of the students in the program. And it really, I almost came to tears by how much he would give. And then the chef too, he's very involved with food organization. He put a garden on the lawn in the legislature in Vancouver, and he's devoted himself. And he said, yeah, look, I'm Chinese, show me the money, you know. He said, but that's not me, you know. I'm Chinese, but that's not me. I'm still another human being, and I care about the planet. So as much as as everybody else, don't like the thing in Tibet, of course not. We've all watched those movies and they tear us up inside. But that doesn't mean that there's still not people over there that want to change and go forward. So I'm just saying that from my side, that really touched me to see that there are people in a country that is so, we see as very dark, and there's so many things that we're concerned about with China. But hopefully there is seeds there too that are bringing things about. So,
the reason it's important to use the microphone is so that our colleagues online can hear what you're saying.
My name is Joseph Martin, and I'm a Universalist, and just like to accept everyone as they are. Recently, because I'm an anthropologist, I've been listening to all the CBC Massey lectures since they started in 1967. This is done annually, and it's trying to raise Canadian consciousness. I started with Martin Luther King Jr. in 1967 when he spoke, and I listened to Margaret Atwood and Marilyn Wright, and right now I'm listening to 1989, Noam Chomsky, Necessary Illusions. So my question to each members of the panel, including yourself, Marilyn, Gillian, is he says that the power elite that runs the world, the corporate elite of all the international corporations and all the countries and all the governments of the world, have complete charge of the media and everything else that goes on in the world, that a common citizen in the world cannot have a say, and we're being inundated with these necessary illusions which only serve the 2 to 4% of the power elite in the world. So all of us as universalists in the world, the men, the women, the children, what can we do and what are you doing, or what would your vision be or your words of wisdom to all the people of the world to overcome and see through and take action, and like what Lisa said about taking action, against and through and beyond for a harmony and a peace beyond the necessary illusions.
Who would like to begin? I think Gillian may be last, because she has big things to say. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll begin. I think that it's not 1999 anymore, and there are no more necessary illusions because we have Facebook and Twitter. And I mean that only a little bit glibly, but also those tools used well and the kinds of connections that they bring about in the actual offline/X real world are really, really powerful. So I think that's the social media landscape is profoundly shifting how we are together as human beings. And just one quick story, re-Facebook. So someone posted on my Facebook page that he is on welfare and could someone please, he needs help getting vegetables. Maybe he wrote me an email. And anyways, I said, okay, if it's okay with you, let's post it to Facebook. So we posted it to Facebook, and all of these vegetables came out of the woodwork via Facebook, right? So that's just one, and it's not like the Times columnist says, welfare rates are low, people need vegetables, although there actually is an article in the Times columnist today that does say that, but that doesn't do anything in the same way that a Facebook post with a similar story does. So that's one piece of the answer. The other piece is a quote that I like to say anytime I can. It's from Kofi Annan, and he says, the next superpower is civil society. And that is a really, really powerful thought to carry with us, I think.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's a great question, and it's something that I struggle with every single day, because the companies that we invest our clients into, we screen them, I have relationships at some level with those companies, so we understand what they're doing, the bad stuff they're doing, as well as the positive stuff they're doing. So I'm a great believer, if you ask what, in terms of what action, to me, we are all shareholders in companies that exist in this country. I bet you if I asked in this room if there was anybody who didn't have any investments, that would include Canada Pension Plan, by the way, would be no one. And I believe what we've done is we've abdicated our responsibilities. It's no different than all of us here not voting when it comes election time. Most of us would never think that's, well, it doesn't matter whether we've got the flu or the measles or whatever, we're going to get our butts over there. But when it comes to being active as a shareholder, it's a complex world. And it's been made that way, my cynical self will say, on purpose. But there are ways in which you can exercise those rights as shareholders. And so visualize, if you will, an annual general meeting where several years ago we went to Pepsi and said, you need to have a water conservation policy. Now think about it, Pepsi, no water conservation policy. One of the largest users of water in the world. And they said to us, the shareholders, now there's a large group of people across Canada that represents some of the pension plans, etc. So it's not just me. But they came back and said, well, we look after the water. Well, why would we ever do anything wrong with the water? And so they actually flew to Vancouver and took 6 of us out for dinner, suggesting that we remove the motion from the floor from the annual general meeting, which was due in 2 weeks. And if we removed it, then they would bring a policy in. It became a game for them. And we said, we're not playing. One of the 6 went to the annual general meeting. Motion got put forward. Now in the US, what happens, if that motion gets 3% of the shareholder vote, it has to come back the following year, automatically. It got 4.7. Now Pepsi's a huge company. The chair of the board was just so angry. He called us a bunch of northern hippies, you know, communists, everything. And this is in an annual general meeting. I mean, this is not just, you know, the private meeting. He was very upset. Within 6 months of this AGM, a plant in India that Pepsi was running dried up the aquifer. The plant went out of business. A town of 12,000 people, no water. It cost Pepsi in the end $420 million to rectify everything. Now as a shareholder, that pissed me off because that money was wasted. Why? Because they didn't have a policy. Guess what happened the next AGM? There was a policy introduced to all the shareholders. So, you know, for me, the answer to your question is, we have to look at what we're doing, right? We have these values that I mentioned earlier that we try to bring our children up with, but in many parts of our lives, we stop. Comes to our wallet. Some of us didn't buy craft food or didn't buy grapes from California for years. What's the next thing that comes along? I'm not sure what that is that we decide not to buy as consumers. But we're not very good at deciding how we can use the wealth that we do have, because if you added all the wealth up that we all have, it's huge, it's big. It does have influence. Because deep down, those people are human beings that are sitting around there. And while they've got their suits on, which is their protective gear about using their values and listening to their hearts, they can't be reached. I've seen it happen, and it's happening every single day. It's not the only answer. It's one, right? The Wall Street sit-in was another one. There are plenty of things that need to be done. But I think all of us have to look and see how we can participate in that. And not just abdicate the responsibility to a bunch of aging old men sitting around in flannel suits on the 14th or 25th floor of Toronto or New York making decisions about what they're going to do to the world. That time's done.
Well, that's it really. Aging people sitting in suits, because I was going to say that for one thing, and it is a great question, for one thing, what about the young people? Because I've had the great pleasure in the over 30 years of my working life internationally to spend a lot of time with young people. And ever and increasingly, I see their resolve to forge a very different world. I was speaking to someone the other day in London who's the president of ISEC, the huge global student union. He's president in the UK, and he was saying to me that the thinking that's coming up now from most of the students that he has a lot to do with is that if they're going to have to work for other companies, if they can't find ways of innovating things themselves, they're looking for companies that are values-based and where there's a lot of meaning to whatever they're doing, and that the issues to do with sustainability and right relationship with community and all of these different things have to be in place. So I hear this so often, and I really feel that around the world, not just with the young, but around the world, there's a quiet revolution going on. And I'm sure that those of you here, and I'm sorry I don't know very many of you, but I would imagine that you represent a lot of different organizations or initiatives or thoughts and feelings that we would call probably evolutionary in a way. And what I mean by that is that you have a sense that there are belief systems that we need to manifest that have to do with collaboration and cooperation and understanding of the interconnected world in which we live, and our sense of responsibility to that. That is common to all of us, and we know that there are people, tens of thousands of people, millions of people, in nations around the world who feel the same way. They just need, I think, a global media platform that is going to manifest what they feel, because we are collectively the conscience, the growing conscience of the world, and I believe that that's unstoppable. And I'm really committed in the work that I do to making sure that that global media platform that's going to manifest that new thinking is going to be in place, probably sooner rather than later. There are plans afoot.
So maybe I have a chance for, Stacey, do you want to? Okay, sorry.
I guess I love reading Noam Chomsky, and I'm always inspired to meet anyone else, and I know Joseph already, who listens to Massey lectures, because they're always so inspiring. For myself, I just find with the level of engagement I have with family and business and many other things, paying attention to media, and especially news, is absolutely, it's the opposite of interesting to me. It doesn't affect how I parent, it doesn't affect how I run my business, it doesn't affect how my garden grows, or how I love my wife. So it has no bearing on me, and I guess I would listen to the Noam Chomsky quote that you said and go, oh, I wouldn't think it's that bad. But I think by my day-to-day practice, I must believe it is, because I don't pay any attention to it whatsoever. I don't follow news or headlines whatsoever. It doesn't, as you said, provide any positive energy to my day, my direction, my inspiration. I don't think I'm a better citizen or anything by following the news. So I simply don't. I don't know what the score was on last night's game. I don't know how the Canucks are doing. I don't know what the latest headlines are. And I found it doesn't matter. People would say you've got your head in the sand, but it doesn't decrease my ability to raise my business or care for the things that matter for me. So I just believe in, a lot of things that happen through email and connections. I take my information through relationships. And so if it's relationless, I really don't set value on it. And I think that there's so many more platforms for information to come relationally. I talk to people in at least 4 or 5 different countries every day on Skype, who on the ground tell me what's going on in that community that I do business with, and that's inspiring for me. When I know farmers got their second payment on the harvest that just came out of Tanzania, and I can find that out 12 hours after it happens, I don't need a channel. It all works. So I'll leave it at that.
Hi, my name is Yvette Bringham-Cowan. I'm happy to say I'm a graduate from the MACAM program, so the conflict program. I've had the pleasure of growing up in this country. I'm of mixed Aboriginal and European descent, and I had the pleasure of going to the TRC this weekend, and I think probably some of the other people in this room have had that opportunity as well. And when you talk about this sort of self-serving interest for the common good, for me that was one of the most profound experiences that I've had. Sheila Roberts mediated the dialogue at the end, or facilitated the dialogue at the end of each day, and it was heartwarming to come to a place in my life where people share the same values that I do, which is this desire for our relationships to become interconnected again and to move to a better place in our relationship with the Aboriginal communities of this country, and to hear people start to decolonialize themselves, their own ways of thinking and their own ways of being. And then the last day she had a discussion about a call to action and what different people wanted to contribute to that conversation. And it was wonderful. And of course it ranged from changing policy and educating young people and having discussions. And myself, I'm involved with a talking circle that brings together Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people to discuss what that feels like for all of us, because it's, for me, and you can hear my emotion in my voice, it's very personal, it's very intimate, and it includes all of my life and from all parts of my family and from all parts of my community. So for me, it's this wonderful opportunity to sit in a space and listen to everybody's opinions. So when we bring up this conversation about leadership and how it's changing and how it's shifting, it feels like to me it's coming home, and it comes to the individual and the individual person and space and community, and it's a really great thing, and I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Yes. I'd rather, oh, yes, please.
My name is Jean-Daniel Cuset. I'm a graduate from the MALT program, and I studied under you at Concordia 10 years ago. My question is, and relating to the Noam Chomsky question in terms of the indoctrination, the level of indoctrination we've had. As we invent a new society, civil society, becoming the next force to be reckoned with, how do we avoid falling into the trap of this indoctrination of hierarchical societies that put people at the top that become corrupted by the power that they were given? This pattern just continues and continues, and we may even be hardwired as a species to always be looking for the pecking order, or the leader that eventually turns on his followers for his own advantage. How do we break that cycle and stop being animals? What's your thoughts on that?
Great question.
Start at the other end this time.
I've got stuff to say, but I don't want to be first all the time.
Well, I think that touches on what I was saying before, that I don't believe that the cycle is going to continue forever, because I hear so many different reflections of belief systems from young people who are not going to repeat that pattern. I also wanted, if I may, just to briefly touch on what you were saying, if you don't mind, just for a moment. Stacey was saying that because you're so active in the world, you don't really need to be looking into what's happening with the media, and you don't have time, which is great. But there are a lot of people who are still so disempowered where they are that they need to be encouraged to know that there is a shift going on in the world of thinking. I was thinking when you were talking about a lot of Hungarian young people who feel very disempowered. The economy is very low in their country, even though they have all sorts of inspirational and aspirational ideas about making a difference both in their nation and beyond. They haven't really had the opportunity yet, but their passion for it is there. And so what they do is they are looking to find other people in the world, often through social media, that feel the same way that they do, so that they feel they're part of a growing movement of positive change. And I really do feel that, I often work with people from sort of 15 to 30 age group across many different nations, and they are saying that as soon as they can find a way to have the opportunity, they will bring about the sort of changes that you're talking about. So I'm ever hopeful for that.
That's an easy question. I'm not sure the answer is. I think, you know, if we take where we live now, and I think, you know, I always say we won the birth lottery. I mean, let's be really honest. We're very fortunate and lucky that we popped out in such a great country. And there's lots of problems, there's no question. Where do we go from here? How do we bring that together? I don't have the answers. You know, I don't, you know, for me it's about following every single day that I can the values that my mother, my father brought me up with. And that's why the Australian kids, but you know, really hit home for me was that fairness. I get just as angry when I watch Daniel Sedin get hit as I do when I hear our Prime Minister making comments about anybody opposing a pipeline is a traitor. That's not the society I want to live in, on either side, whether it's hockey or otherwise. And I think it's about, you know, it's again about here. It's about doing, and I forgot who it was in the film that you interviewed, where he said it's a person who turned to be a philanthropist. Very fortunate to be in that situation. He tries to do 3 things every day that nobody else really knows who did them. And just think if all of us in this room did 3 things every day that were positive, that were loving, what would happen? And it's going to take that kind of movement. We may not be around to see what the end looks like. But if I think back 30 years ago, earlier, probably longer than that, my years as an environmentalist, activist, and I see where we are today. If you had asked me 30 years ago, 35 years ago, where we thought we would be in 2012, I would not have expected us to be this far. But somehow we got here. And I got to believe a lot of it has to do with more of us getting in touch with the inner self. And it's about love, right? It's about love for our neighbors, for each other, for ourselves, for sure. And it's about the respect and appreciating where we grew up. And the responsibility that comes with that, of course. But in terms of what's the structure or how that happens, I don't know. I'm a Star Trek fan, so maybe that's it.
I really resonate with what Stephen mentioned earlier, and we've talked about it before, he and I, and that's just honoring people on a continuum as they move towards a better understanding of who they are and who they can become. And I think back to when blue boxes showed up in Victoria and people started recycling their newspapers, and that was seen as revolutionary. And we've been, as a company, I think 7 years now, landfill free, and we care for all the recycling, 13 streams of it, of all of our staff at our expense so that they can be landfill free households as well. And that seems eons beyond where we were when I remember my first blue box. But it was a foreign concept to me to recycle when it started happening in my 20s. And now it seems normal, not foreign at all, to send nothing to Heartland at all, ever. And both of those are possibilities, but there has to be quite a significant shift. And I remember staff person by staff person, the different responses that people had to the very same concept. And some people embraced it immediately, some people were downright sarcastic, and others just said, it'll never happen. And what we've increasingly done in our business is we've just focused on hiring to values rather than hiring to skill sets. Working with the notion that just about any task that a person does in our company can be trained in a matter of weeks, months, or maybe years. But we can't train character formation into a person more than likely who's an adult. They've probably formed their character, and it's unlikely, if they're not a person of integrity in their 20s or 30s, that we're going to bring that shift about in a corporate environment. So the people whose values don't align just easily step out and back away. And they don't last long through their own awareness of what's taking place. And those whose values align develop a massive skill set that makes them invaluable to the business because the values align. And I just feel that when we can honor where people are at in their growth and their direction along the continuum of becoming a fuller person, we see incredible potential realized. So I see that working really well in schools and in workplace.
I love your question. How do we wire ourselves differently? Are we hardwired this way? I saw this great movie at the IMAX. I had a season pass last year, and it's called Wired to Win. And it was about, what's that long bike ride in France? Tour de France, there we go. See, I'm not wired to remember sports facts. And the movie is made by a combination of people interested in cycling and people interested in neuroscience, and it shows brain activity. Like when you're learning to do a new thing, the neurons move really, really slowly, right? And then as your brain gets more used to doing that activity, they move more quickly. And that to me is so hopeful, because we are, each of us individually and us as a society, hardwired in very particular ways. But by doing things a little bit differently, we actually change the configuration of our neurons, which is really powerful. You know, one of the things that when I was a teenager, I would smoke when things were stressful, right? And when you're a teenager and things are stressful, writing an essay is stressful. So, you know, I buy a pack of cigarettes to write my essay. And now as an adult, when things get stressful, what do? I smoke, because my brain is hardwired that way. But I'm really, really working hard to unhardwire it by saying, Lisa, you feel stress, have a cup of licorice tea, go for a walk, whatever it is, right? And it's actually, like, I can actually feel my own brain changing, which is really cool. And that gives me hope for all of our brains and our collective brain.
Just another piece to add to that. I think we've got some stories that we tell ourselves that aren't true. And it is, for example, that being concerned about the common good is somehow taking away from our time for ourselves. Or in business, you know, caring for the people in the company, the customers, paying a lot of attention to people costs too much. You know, I was over at the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, a consortium of financial institutions across the world, of which the only Canadian financial institution is Van City. And they just have produced, with the Rockefeller Foundation, a huge study, very careful study, that compares those banking institutions who operate by very different principles. They say what's needed in a community and how can we finance it. Turns out that they are making more money proportionately than all of the great banks in the world. So we've got some stories that are actually quite crazy, either on a personal level or in an organizational level. So in actual fact, when we're busy trying to go for the bottom line, think only about the money, that is when things start to go bad. And it's replicating. There's a wonderful book called The Firms of Endearment, which actually chronicle how major companies, I'm talking about now Fortune 500 size companies, who really care, who are really loved by people, actually are outperforming the good to great companies of Jim Collins, if you're aware of that. So these stories that we're telling ourselves are actually not necessary, they're not helpful, and they are not true. And in fact, there is a synergy around being engaged. I believe now, quite clearly, that when we let our spirit soar, in actual fact, get engaged, give, like, I love the smile on that philanthropist's face when he talked about doing things without people having to. It wasn't an ego trip, it was giving. Giving has created an incredible amount of energy and encouragement and self-satisfaction. I think actually we have a need to be giving, and we don't really act that out. And why are we satisfied with looking after ourselves all the time, which keeps us kind of at a sort of a puddling along level of personal fulfillment you know. So I think actually, John Danielle, and I didn't recognize you because we both changed since.
You haven't changed.
Because we saw one another. I think actually there's some wonderful things that can break through, and I'm like my colleagues, very hopeful that when we start selling these stories, when we start taking down the sort of the shadowy sort of cover on what's possible and wake up, that things will really start to soar, and it'll be a tipping point thing in my view.
Hi, I'm Sandra. I'm just about finished a master's in intercultural and international communication. And all of my life I have been involved with marginalized groups. So I have a few comments. I think for me, one of the biggest impacts that the film had was the philanthropist when he was talking about how the transformation has to happen inside first. And I'm sad that that the lady who spoke about Tibet left shortly after instead of staying in the conversation, because it reminded me of what Lisa had just said about, you know, sometimes we fight and sometimes we don't agree and we're all different. I'm always really cognizant of difference, and one of the interesting things, thank you for your comment about the truth and reconciliation, what that made me think of is in the paper a couple days ago, I wish I could remember who wrote it, or who they had interviewed. I want to say Butch Dick, but I don't think that's who it was. It was a prominent First Nations person here in Victoria, and he was saying that a lot of First Nations people didn't want to go to the Truth and Reconciliation, or they went but they didn't want to speak. And there were numerous reasons for that, but my point in bringing it up is I think it's really, really, really critical. I mean, we're saying all these really wonderful things here. This keeps going off and on. We're saying all these really wonderful things here tonight, which I totally agree with, but then there's this whole other huge number of people in the world who don't have the privileges we have, which you mentioned, and their voices don't get heard because there's a gap in the values that you're talking about, and then the ability to communicate with the people that need to be communicated with. So I'm hopeful when Lisa was talking about doing microlending to, it sounds like, for, I mean, sometimes really marginalized people. And Stacey's talking about trading with often very marginalized groups of people who don't have a lot of power in the communities that they live in necessarily. So that makes me hopeful, but I think my overarching point of saying all of these things is that we have to stay really, really mindful of those who are marginalized that we never hear from, because we're only as good culturally as our least fortunate people are. It's how we treat them that shows who we are at a value-based level.
Thank you very much.
Could I just add to that? Thank you so much, Sandra, and I wanted to say thank you and give respects to my native sister. I'm Mohawk. My real name is Donegalenqua, and I'm a First Nations man. And in our way, we're all native to the earth. There's only one family, as Dr. Bruce Lipton was saying, we're all cells of one family. And in our way, our elders say that we need to, it's all storytelling. And I'm going to try to put something back to the panel and ask for their response, because I agree very much. My life has been trying to do for 40 years truth and reconciliation with Canadian people about our Aboriginal sisters and brothers, whose land we actually stand on, and I want to give respect to our ancestors here. And the point being that in 40 years there's been some headway, but I really don't feel in the hearts of Canadians there has been much headway at all with our First Nations peoples. We need to have a new vision. We need to reimagine a new inclusive story. And the story has to start with the values of the First Nations of all the world, not just Kanata, which is the Mohawk word for Canada, by the way, and 80% of the names of towns and cities are First Nations in our country here. So how can each one of you, and I'm glad to have my esteemed friends, because I know everybody here and happy to meet Gillian on the panel, how can you reimagine a new story here communally in Victoria? This is all First Nations land, and all the ancestors for 8,000 and 12,000 years have lived here. We've only been here 150 years, those who have been more recent, 100 or 200 years. How can you reimagine a new story that's so inclusive, and it is about love and forgiveness? That's the key. There will be no truth and reconciliation, either here in Victoria or worldwide, until we all see each other as sisters and brothers. What is our new inclusive story?
I think we don't know yet. And I think, as the last speaker said, me, white colonizer, doesn't actually get to tell that story. My job, I took an amazing course. I'm obviously part of the story, but I took an amazing course called Indigenous Women's Narratives, taught by Christine Welsh in the Women's Studies Department at UVic, and it was fantastic. And we read 5 books, that was it for the whole term. And she asked each of us, Native and non-Native, how is this a story for you? How is this a story for you? And then she asked those of us who were non-Native to shut up. For the most part. I mean, she didn't say it like that. She said, you know, think about how this is a story for you, but this is a space for storytelling, to connect these stories. And they weren't all Canadian, written by Canadian Aboriginal or First Nations women. They were from all over the world. And so I think that the last speaker made the point, if we're going to develop collective stories, there's a hell of a lot of listening that needs to go on. And anyways, I could go into Foucault, but I won't. But one of the things that, no, that's really important to me about listening and about leadership is an idea of ethics. And it's Foucault's idea of ethics from stuff that was published after he died. And he talks about ethics as practice, and the practice of reflecting on how we are in the world. And so if you tell me something, I'm not really listening unless, I'm not ethically listening unless I am somehow changed by what I hear from you. Right? And so I think that's how we're going to get new stories, when we ethically listen and have our own selves and our own stories willing to be changed.
It's a really tender spot for me, what you're saying, and I think part of it is parenting kids who are a minority in their own school and community. There's virtually no African heritage representation in Victoria. And living in Brentwood, which has a number of First Nations peoples very close by, I see how segregated even the schools where the First Nation kids choose to attend the public system, the segregation is brutal. Coaching in sport, even when we have family days together, the kids who bring their parents who are First Nations, they sit separate, and there doesn't seem to be a way for people to buddy up. And I see a complete inability to create dialogue. So I'm saying, the question you're asking me, I can't imagine how to reimagine it. I know that for me it's a heartbreaking reality. I've wondered if there's ways that I can garden or farm or do anything that would collect others together that would include First Nations people in the Brentwood area where I live, because it's of such great interest and concern. In fact, it's the part for me that makes me question how much of a community I live in. I love it in the way that it exists, but I see that it's the elephant in the room. Like, there's all these people living right there, but they're not part of the community, and we're not part of their community, and the dialogue is virtually non-existent. So I'm curious, I'm hopeful, I'm expectant, but I don't know where it goes. I think I feel very much like I need to listen to the conversation and see where there's ways for me to be a part of it and enter in.
Good question, Joseph. Part of my past is working in Aboriginal communities, and I was in those days what they call the band manager. So I was like the white administrator in an all Aboriginal community. Taught me a tremendous amount, taught me humbleness, taught me some of the horrible, awful things that went on that you and I wouldn't put up with in a heartbeat. I also did this in the Northwest Territories, where I was head of land claim negotiations for the Dene Nation. So for me, it is about listening, absolutely. But it's also about creating relationships. It's about that we. There is no I in we. You know, team sports like to always say that, but it's true. And what would happen if we all reached out? Didn't matter whether it was Aboriginal or African descent or what that was, and included people in what we did. So it's always a struggle, and you know, I've lived up north for many years, and certainly when I was in the Northwest Territories, I was a minority. And I'd be in a community and there would be the white guy sitting at the table. And what struck me is that I got invited to everything that community did. I got invited to potlatches. I saw things that I'm not sure were real or not. I got to understand some of the culture, and I was honored to be called a friend. And yet, now we sit down in white man's land, as I call Victoria, and there are Aboriginal communities all around us. And we help create those. Those are what I call concentration camps. But we don't reach out. You know, and I wonder what would happen if part of that is just simply creating friendships beyond our normal busy life circle, and I'm as guilty as anybody of that. We all have other things we have to get done. So what would happen if we create a relationship with another Aboriginal family who lived in Tasup? You know, you take a look at what some of the Aboriginal communities are doing when they're given the opportunity. It's awesome. It's incredible. No different than anybody else. But you know what? They have a lot of history with the land. There's a lot to learn. And often I wonder just how arrogant we've gotten ourselves to be about, you know, we see poverty and it gets labeled. And that's a tough one to get over. And who knows what the future is going to bring, but it has to be we. It can't be them. It can't be concentration camps. It can't be the horrible things that have happened. And if that means that we've got to sit around a table and figure out what that looks like, self-government. And it's not Aboriginal people. Every one of those communities is a nation. They're separate. And until we get that through our heads, which is sometimes it's very difficult. Certainly, my experience was very difficult for government to understand. What do you mean? You're just 100 miles away. How could you possibly be another nation? And so there's all these stereotypes that we tend to throw out. And I think it's really important to wipe that slate clean and learn, and you learn by listening.
I'm probably not in a position to have a view on this, except to say that having worked a great deal in the last 25 years in the US, I have never heard the type of compassionate and attempting bridge building language about the Indigenous people as much as I have in the last week of being here. And it's made such an impression upon me. Marilyn took me to part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission time the other day when they were talking about human rights. And so, I mean, I have more questions than answers. I mean, as Lisa was saying, it's about listening and it's about learning how to listen. But lots of things were going through my mind that day when we were sitting there at that meeting. And I was wondering whether people sing together, whether you've got choirs where you've got, I don't know how you call yourselves, the regular Canadians. I mean, you're all folks to me, whether you're Indigenous people or not over here. I just find there's such a lot of warmth towards this subject here that your question was very interesting to me because it revealed the pain of still great divisions that are going on there, which weren't so obvious to me the other day, even though I was at Commission Day. So I'm just wondering, do you cook together at times? Do you have family friends from these different Indigenous people's family lives? Do you, as I said, do you sing together? Because quite often music is a wonderful way of bridging beyond everything else. And what a joy to share each other's songs. I know that in Australia, particularly in Western Australia, where I had quite a lot to do with some of the tribal peoples there, especially in the areas around a place called Albany near the coast. But one of the ways that bridge budding is happening there is through singing together, teaching each other the songs of each other's backgrounds. And that's a wonderful thing to do as well. But I'm sorry that I don't have any magic answers for this, but I'm very touched by what's going on here because you all seem to care so much about it, and I'm sure there are many parts of the world where that simply isn't true at all.
I just wanted to add something that just came to me now, but I've done a lot of research in the area of intercultural competence and how to be more interculturally competent. And one of the thing I just kept coming up against in all the reading and all the research again and again and again is having a sense of curiosity about difference, and I think that's where we have to start. We have to be willing to listen, but we also have to be curious. Like somebody on the panel was saying about, you know, looking at somebody and going, wow, I think it was Lisa, wow, this person's really different than me, but how can I connect? What's interesting about their differences that I could be curious about? So I think that's a place to start.
I think maybe there's one more question, or are we ready to? Yeah, please.
Very short. My name's Ian Curtin. I'm the project director for a thing called the Interactivists. Excuse me. And we're actually training change agents and looking at relational skills. And I really just got up to thank you for the movie in terms of the models, because it seems so important to these days to be looking around the world and seeing all the innovative things that are happening, because it stimulates thought, and the transference of ideas and trying new things out is wonderful. And I also just stood up really for reinforcing the notion that, you know, when we go through school, we don't really learn much about relating with each other, and it's kind of astounding the level of, I mean, I certainly understood the level of understanding monetary systems isn't very high either, but our understanding how we relate with each other, and actually a daily practice of imagining how another person thinks. I mean, just taking time out and instead of getting angry at someone who you're charged with or triggered with, actually taking some time and having the skills to know what it's like, what that energy is like, and actually what you've maybe projected outside yourself, that and rather than making an enemy, but just being curious about that. And I think that's one of the keys around difference, and also taking time to really look at, you know, what kind of rank and privilege we actually swim in, because when you're swimming in the water all the time, it's really difficult to know that you're in that water. So just a real pitch for re-educating ourselves on the specifics of how we relate with each other.
Well, I want to thank all of you who've come tonight, and also those of you who are online. I want also to thank Lisa and Stacy and Stephen for a riveting panel, and Jill for coming from quite far away from the UK to bring the film. We had the Canadian premiere of this film in Vancouver appropriately, because of course that was the only place in our country that was actually filmed, and it was a great conversation also. And what I learned from that is that that what we should be doing, and we will be trying to do, is provide a continuing conversation, ways for people of mutual interest and questions to carry on to speak. So I think if you want Dave to just pass that over, there's ways that you can keep in touch with us, and there's a LinkedIn there at the bottom if you want to continue to talk. And we also have, I think, probably some of your all of your email addresses, and we'll invite you to remain connected with us if you want to. I also want to thank Leanna Hill. Would you stand up, Leanna, please? Leanna Hill is a graduate of our university. She's also working with the youth program at Volunteer Victoria, which is an expression, a huge and important expression, I think appropriate to this film too, around engaging youth in our community. All of the proceeds from this evening will go to the youth program. And I want to thank, and Leanna, by the way, just has received one of Leadership Victoria's awards for her contribution in this respect. So, I just
because we will do good work with them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And I just wanted to mention that if anyone wants a film, we have some copies which we can give you for $16, I think, and Leanna will help us do that. Are there people who want film? Should we? Okay, so we'll just give us a few minutes to run back and get the film. Anyway, thank you very much, and I hope this is the first of many meetings. Have a good evening.